Welcome back to another tutorial. In this episode, you're going to learn how to create a VR environment and add your own custom grabbable objects like a flashlight. I'm going to walk you through step by step how to download custom free objects from the web, how to bring them into your environment, and how to modify them. The first step is we got to open up Unreal Engine, which I have open, and I am using Unreal Engine 5.4. So let's create a very basic template for this environment. Of course, you could do this in your own environment, but I will point out some things later on that you'll just need to consider if you're using an existing environment. So I'll go over to Games and I will click on Virtual Reality and then give a name to the project down in the lower right. And we'll just call this Grab Tutorial 2. I did one before, so I'll call it Grab. You can name the project whatever you want. Don't select the starter content, you don't need it. And once you click on Create, we will get our project open. So now we're in the basic VR template and we are running Unreal Engine 5.4. In order for us to create a new grabbable object, I want to create a place for us to do that. Now, if you'll notice, there are already some grabbable objects that you can take a look at if you want at another point. We've got some guns, we've got some cubes, and we've got this ball. All of those are which are grabbable. But we're going to create an entirely new asset from scratch. We're actually going to download it off the web using Sketchfab. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm just going to take this existing, let's call it a desk, and I'm going to hold down the Alt key and slide out another copy. And then let's rotate that. The shortcuts for these various tools at the top I've talked about before are W, E, and Q, R. So we're just going to use E. And I will rotate this 90 degrees, go back to all my hotkeys and bring that. And I'm just creating a little table for myself. And let's just put it right here. Now, what's really interesting, I think, in VR, when you are building these environments, I'm seated at my desk. And the reason I put this table over here is because it's really hard for me to grab things with my right hand when I'm seated over on this side. So something for you to think about, that if you're going to be reaching out and grabbing things while you're seated, maybe you want to put this on the right-hand side. All right. Notice it says that the lighting needs to be rebuilt. If you do get that in your environment, you can just go up to the Build menu and choose Build Lighting Only. I won't do that right now. We'll handle that later on. So now we need to bring an asset into our environment that we're going to turn into a grabbable object. And the way for us to do that is we should really always start by going over to the content folder in the lower left and right-clicking and making a folder for ourselves for the stuff that we're going to bring in. And if we're making blueprints, that kind of stuff as well. So I'll go up to New Folder and I will give this a name and we'll call it Custom Assets. You can call it whatever you want. Now let's pop over to the internet and pull up Sketchfab. If you're not aware of what Sketchfab is, and this is not a sponsored video, this is a website that I use to get all kinds of 3D assets. There's a ton of them, like thousands upon thousands of them that are free, and there's some that you can pay for. We'll grab an entirely free one today. So I'm logged in. You'll need to create an account for yourself if you don't have one. And I just searched for flashlight. This tutorial is going to be doing a flashlight today. And the reason I'm using a flashlight is because, well, I'm going to teach you some amazing things today. Not only how to grab this object, but how to attach things to the object. And I think the flashlight's a really good example rather than just, creating a stick or a knife or a sword, something you can hold in your hand. Let's create something that needs illumination as well. You would just click on this button right here. If you notice these objects that have the download, that means that they are free. And I just grab this, choose download. Which format should you pick? The answer is the GLB format, and I've talked about that in my other videos because these import really nicely to Unreal, not only the model, but all the various textures as well. Now you've got a decision to make. Do you want to grab a 1K texture, which is a lower resolution texture, or do you need to grab a 2K texture? This one is 10 megabytes. I'm going to grab the larger one, but these are always decisions you can make. And so depending on how you're looking for the graphic style to be, you can make a choice. My personal opinion, because a flashlight is so small, there's nothing wrong with grabbing the 2 megabyte texture, but I will download the 10 megabyte one. Click on download. Down it comes. I can see that in the top right in my browser, and I've got it. I've already downloaded one already, so you can see it is named with the number 1. All right, back to Unreal. We need to import our flashlight into the environment. And to do that, I'm simply, with the custom assets folder selected, going to move up and click on import. I'll go to my downloads folder. Notice I've got the 2 versions of the flashlight that I grabbed. I'll just get this first one. And by the way, these were downloaded as a GLB file themselves. There's no extraction needed. So that's how I'm able to just grab that file format and open it up, and check this out. I click on open. A dialog box comes up that seems really scary. I'll just click on reset selected pipeline because that seems to work most of the time for me. And then I'll click on the import button. And voila, inside our flashlight inside this folder now is the static mesh flashlight and the various different textures that make up that flashlight. With that done, we now can drag it into our environment. So we're going to drag the flashlight right onto this little countertop right there. And let's zoom in and take a look. I'll just pull it up a little bit and you can see the flashlight. Now at this point, this flashlight, even though it has this texture right here that looks like it is shining light, it is not shining light at all. And we'll test it out in this dark room in a little bit. With the asset brought in, let's give it a size. Right now it's too small, and the only reason that I know that is because I walked through this tutorial before I started recording for you guys, so I know that I should size it up a little bit, and I'm just going to do that. Now I can resize it by just coming up here. Shortcut to that is the R key, and by clicking in the middle anchor, it sizes it on every dimension. If I grab the top, it's going to skew it. I'm going to click undo. If I go this way, it's too long. So that's why I click the middle one, and all of them are yellow, and it scales it up that way. So if you look at the size of the guns, which are already proportioned for VR, and you look at that flashlight, the flashlight may be a little big right now, so let's go down just a little bit, but there you go. In order to make something grabbable, if you notice this cube right here, when I select it, notice the cube has attached to it over here a grab component. That's the difference between this cube and the flashlight, is that the flashlight does not have a grabbable component and the cube does. So I'm going to teach you how to add that. Go in the lower left corner and click on all, and then in the search box, type the word grab. That there is this grab component blueprint class, wow, that's difficult to say, inside the VR template. I'm going to open it up, and even though we're not going to make any edits to this today, I want you to take a careful look at this, because this is the latest blueprint grabbable template with version 5.4. And if you don't have something this extensive in your project, that's what I was mentioning earlier, is that while you could do this in your project, you would need to migrate this grab component over to your project so that it has the latest logic and capabilities, and you probably will need to do a little bit tweaking as well. Since I'm using the template, all of this is going to work right out of the box for me. And so to make the flashlight grabbable, I simply click and drag over to the static mesh component of the flashlight. That's right. If you didn't know, if you're new to Unreal, when you look at this details panel, not only are you able to set all the different properties for that actor, but underneath you can add things to it. It's almost like Lego. Now, this grab component is not an actual physical thing. We're going to do that in just a minute, but it's a blueprint that's being added to the flashlight. So by adding it to the flashlight, I'm giving it capabilities that it didn't have before. It's like snapping on a logic to our piece of Lego, if you will. Very, very cool, very powerful capability. We can add blueprints like this, or we can add other things like, guess what? A light. Let's do that. This time I'm going to add the light using this button right here. And the reason I'm going to do this is I prefer this method for adding something like a light to an object. And you're maybe wondering, could I have clicked add and typed in the word grab here and added the grab component this way? I absolutely could have, and I normally would have, except that by me doing it this way, I'm showing you where that blueprint is within your project. So in order to add a light to the flashlight, I can just come over to add, and then I can type the word spot, and you'll notice there's a spotlight. Now a spotlight is a built-in object within the Unreal Engine, so that's why we don't need to download it from the internet like Sketchfab. So it's all part of the assets that are already in the project file. And now we've got our light added, and you can see it just added it right there. We do want to slide out the light. Very, very important thing to explain to you right now. Notice that when I move this, I'm moving the light, and that's because I just added it. If I click on the flashlight, I'm moving both the flashlight and the light. And the way that this is happening that's different is because if you notice, it depends what I select over here. So if I click on the spotlight, then I'm moving the light. If I click on the static mesh, then I'm moving both objects together. I'm sure you're familiar with the term parent and child. In this case, the parent object is the static mesh component, which is the flashlight, and the child is both grab and spotlight. Now, should spotlight be a child of grab? No. So add it by dragging up to the static mesh. All I did was click and drag, and now this is mom, and these are their two kids. Okay, so we want that kind of hierarchy as opposed to attaching the spotlight to the grab component. Now there's some things that we need to do next to get everything working really well, but let's bring this into a darker environment for right now. So I'm going to hold down the shift key. Let me click on static mesh. I'm going to hold down my shift key, and when I do that, it carries the camera with me, and I find it's an easier way to move. So a couple things about lighting that we're going to learn in this tutorial as well. Notice the cone shape of the lighting, and notice the color of the lighting and the distance that it's going. We can adjust all of those things. So I'm going to kind of approximate where my VR height would be, and I imagine it's going to be right there. And now I'm going to make some adjustments to my lighting. To tweak the lighting, I've got to come over here to the right and click on the spotlight. That will change the details that are being displayed. If I have the grab component, different details, static mesh, different details. So don't forget, you've got to click on the object that you are modifying the details. And there's only a few that we really want to learn in this particular one. The intensity, the light color, the attenuation radius, those are the things that we're going to be messing with right now, as well as the outer cone. So intensity units, notice there is unitless and lumens and EV. I actually know a fair amount about lumens and lighting from doing work in my house, so I'm going to switch it to lumens. And then notice there's a 14 lumen light. Well, I know that at 200, that's a pretty good bright light. 400 lumen lights, a lot of those I've got in my bathroom, very bright, 500. So you can use whatever intensity unit calculation you want, but I'm a little bit more familiar with lumens, so I'm switching to that. Let's go back to 200. Now, if you remember when we go back to Sketchfab, there are different types of lights and flashlights. Now, because none of these lights actually cast light, we have the choice of making things how we want to look. But obviously, if you wanted like a little green light or a bright white light, you've got that ability to change the flashlight color that you want. And if you're making something like a horror game or a different type of utility tool, maybe you want to change the light color. So I'm just going to click on light color. You've got a nice little palette right here, and you can move your cursor all around and change the light color. I'm going to do something that's kind of like a little kind of white light, but a little bit softer. All right, now what's the attenuation radius? As I move it, you see this ball that's moving out. Let me move in a different direction, and you can see it's the tip of the cone. So the attenuation radius is basically how far the light is going to be casted, because even though there is light being emitted along this, it is the outside where it will end. I'm going to move down to the outer cone angle and drop it down, and that tightens it up a little bit. And I think, for a game where I'm walking around almost like a police officer or investigator or a horror game, that works really, really well. And then do we want light to be able to cast it on the wall? And if we want that, we just increase the attenuation radius. So as I tweak the attenuation radius, I get to choose how far that light's really casted. And I'm going to do this all the way onto the walls. Now the light itself is not going in the right direction. Do you notice that it's bent out? Well, how do we fix that? That one's pretty simple. We just change to the rotation tool and then just rotate our light a little bit. Make sure you've got the spotlight selected when you do that, but we want to make sure that that's lined up very nicely with the flashlight. And if it's snapping too much and you want to make a finer adjustment, you can come up here, which enables and disables the snapping for rotation. And if I turn that off, I can make some really fine-tune adjustments and get that looking just right. The other thing I want to do is see where that light comes out of the flashlight. I'm going to hit the G button, and you'll see that that turns on and off the lighting inside the environment. And with my spotlight selected, I'm going to slide this back a little bit and just move myself and the camera right here because I really want to see where that light is. It's snapping too much, so let me turn off snapping and I can make some fine-tune adjustments. And I'm sure you guys are going to have fun playing with this. Get it right there. Okay, so I'm going to turn snapping back on. There are a couple critical things that we need to do in order for us to make the flashlight grabbable. With the static mesh selected, notice down here, we've got mobility, static, stationary, or movable. If we don't change the static mesh to movable, we're going to be in trouble. Notice if I click on grab, it shows that it's movable, and that's why I want to make sure that you see that you've got to click on the static mesh and make that movable so we can grab it in VR. There is one final setting that we need to make, and that is physics. If you notice that when I drag the flashlight up, or even when I had it in the other room, if I come to the dots right here and I put myself in simulation mode, the flashlight stays flying in the air. And that's not actually appropriate for a flashlight. It would fall to the ground. So I'm going to hit stop. And then what I'll do is with the flashlight selected, I'll type in the search box over here, sim, and I'm going to check the box to simulate physics. And once I have done that, now when I go back into simulation mode and click on play, the flashlight falls to the top. You wouldn't have seen that if I left it on the counter, so that's why I raised it up a little bit. I'm going to hit stop, and then now I will actually just set it on the counter so I know where it is when I grab it in my headsets. So now without further ado, let's put on the headsets and see how things are working. All right, I've got my goggles on, and like I said, I've got a clear area for my left hand to reach out and grab the flashlight. Here we go. And I have grabbed the flashlight. Really cool, and I can shine it around. And if you'll notice, if I shine it on the wall right here, we see the light, but if I go inside, it doesn't cast all the way to that dark area because we set it to only have a certain distance. Let's move into that area and use our flashlight. So everything is working really well and really cool, except where I've grabbed the flashlight. And that's why I wanted to show you what it's going to look like before I make this last adjustment. Before we drop out of VR, I want to show you how I'm able to grab and switch hands and actually rotate this flashlight all around. Now, for some of the things that you want players or users to pick up, maybe this is the right behavior, but for the flashlight, I actually don't want it that way. I want it to actually kind of be like this when I pick it up. This free grabbing is one of the settings, or there is a snap setting so that when I grab it, it will automatically be in my hand like that. So we're going to make two setting changes. One is where we grab it and the type of grabbing that we're doing. The first thing we're going to change is the way in which we grab the flashlight. So come on over and click on the grabbable object that you added to the flashlight, and you'll notice down here that there is a default grab type of free. That's what enabled me to grab it and move it around in my hands. But if I click the drop-down menu and go to snap, then when I grab it, it's going to snap to my hand in a particular way. Let me quickly show you that, and then we'll fix where it snaps. You'll notice now that when I grab the flashlight, it snaps. I don't have free rotation. I can't grab it in a different way. It always snaps. So the only thing left for us to do is change where that pivot point is. The other thing is I do want to hold the flashlight with my hand like this pointing out, so I'm going to rotate it about 180 degrees. Now for the finishing touches on our object, we need to pay attention to really one specific thing, but I want to show you both. Whenever you select an object, there is the pivot point, and that is this piece right here. And that controls the object that you're moving.
let's say you want to make sure that that pivot point is in a certain alignment. Well, in order to do that, you just hold down your middle mouse and click and you move that. And that will adjust the pivot point for this, but you need to do one very important thing after you move it, right after you move it. And that is right click and go down to pivot and say set the pivot offset. And that will keep this anchor where that is. So if I click off it and click back, you can see where that is. That's important for moving and scaling and adjusting objects, but it has nothing to do with how you grab something. That's the actual grab component, which is right here. So when I choose the grab component, if I want to move that, all I need to do without using the middle mouse is adjust where that location is. So when I brought in the object and I had it here initially, let me show you what that looks like when I go ahead and grab it. I'm going to move it way far back so you can see it. So you'll see now when I go over to grab the flashlight and I grab it right back here, and it's also in that angle. I want to have it 180 degrees so it's like this, and I want to grab it more in the middle of the flashlight. So let's make that final adjustment, and that's super important for you to be able to grab things in the right place. So I just put the grab component where I want to grab the flashlight, which is right here. And the other thing that I'm going to do is turn on rotation and rotate the grab component 180 degrees. And there we have it. So with that rotation and changing the grab component, I like where I'm holding the flashlight. I might make a little further adjustment, but you get the idea.
I showed earlier that lighting needs to be rebuilt. Let me show you how to do that real quick. You come up to the build menu and choose build lighting only, and it will run through that process. If you are using this template, it shouldn't take very long at all. And my build lighting is now done. If you haven't already subscribed, consider doing so. And let's continue on our journey in learning how to build VR environments. And I hope you really enjoyed this one, learning how to add objects into your environment that you can grab.